Tina is with us as well. Okay.
Do you mind if I disappear for 1 second?
No, it's fine.
Yeah, I brought the wrong notes. 1 second.
It's okay, it's okay. Hello, everybody. We are only starting, so maybe let's take a few minutes until we all gather. And thank you for coming to the presentation of the Non-Aligned Archive. Yeah, if you want, you can turn on your cameras if you like. It's nice to see faces with us, but you absolutely do not have to. Hi. Thank you for waiting. People are still joining in. Hi, Elena. Okay, people are still joining, so let's give it another minute or two until we start. While we are waiting, you can take a look at our Non-Aligned Archive webpage. I put it in the chat. Yeah, such a nice crew forming. Really, really happy to see you all here. So yeah, maybe we can start. We have time and people can join slowly. Hello everybody. My name is Petra from Jutro. I'm so happy to present our project, the Non-Aligned Archive, or Archiv Nesvrstanih in our language. This is a project that we started last year, and yeah, it's finally ready to see the world. We have really wonderful guests with us today. And so thank you for joining across time zones, across continents. Yeah, we would like this to be the beginning of a shared space where we can think critically, where we can think softly about archives, about communities, and what it is to speak from here to the world, wherever we are. So yes, today we have with us some exceptional speakers. So far, 3 are with us. We are not sure if our researcher Drea will be able to join us. She might be later because of a family emergency, unfortunately. But I think me and my colleague Stella from Jutro can talk a little bit about our process from the side of the archive. But also with us, we have Mutanu Kyany'a from African Digital Heritage. We have Zainab Gaafar from Safeguarding Sudan's Living Heritage. And we have Seth Avusuglo from Library of Africa and African Diaspora. And we are so happy to have them all with us and to have all of you with us in this conversation. I hope that this conversation is not too official or strict. And yes, I hope we can have a nice time. I will ask you to write your questions in the chat for now, and then later we can all have a conversation, but let's first hear from our guests. I hope that's fine with everybody. And yes, for those who have been waiting, you might have taken a look at our website. You can also see it on the photo here. So this is a community archive that tries to collect and preserve the memories of many communities in Croatia, Asian, African, and American. We called it the non-aligned archive because the majority of the people who are trying to be that we try to represent in this archive have come here as students from the late 1950s until the 1990s. And this was maybe the most wonderful time, especially in the 60s and 70s, when there was a lot of crossover, a lot of real diversity and real friendship. And yes, we are very, very proud to have an archive like this and guests like this with us, so that we can talk a little bit about the importance of archives and importance of community. Yes, so if you don't mind, I would start with a question for Mutanu. Hi, Mutanu. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can. Hi, Petra.
Hey, thank you. I would like to ask you about community ownership of African heritage, especially in digital spaces. And I also want to say that for us, it was very important to make the archive so that it could be available to everyone who might need it. Because I have been trying for a long time to find who wants this material and who has the right to this material. So the digital community archive for us is sort of a compromise. But I want to ask from your side, what is this ownership and how do you protect it, you and your colleagues?
I think from my side and what I believe, and I think also what kind of informs our practice, is that ownership, looking at it from like a literal point of view, ownership to belong to. And when you look at how knowledges and systems of living and cultures are owned where I come from, they're very much community owned. And here, I think if you really understand ownership, then there's a sort of care that comes with owning something, a sort of wanting to take care of it for longevity, but also to take care of it from a point of view of it's mine. So looking at ownership from a point of first, not belonging to one person, but belonging to a system, belonging to many people. And here, I think also looking at it from a point of view of community, which is very essential in that for the times where I can't care for something and we're a group, then I know and I believe the people who we like are strung together or who have been brought together, then are also able to take care of this thing in case that I'm not around, but also in the case when I just can't. And I feel like that's the importance of community or community ownership. But I think it should come from a point of first an acknowledgement of why this thing is important, of why it belongs to the people. And from this point of belonging is where now the people will be able to now think through what care practices work for them, what care practices and what longevity practices not just work for them, but have worked for them for a long time, and how they can continue improving this. Looking at it from a point of view of like a digital archive, then you see here in terms of ownership, first, not belonging to one person would then mean maybe something along open access, but it will also mean like an acknowledgement of the contributors of this knowledge to be able for it to sit on like a digital platform. So first, I think what should guide this practice is one, an acknowledgement of the importance or the value of this thing that we want to own, and two, who are the people that claim ownership for it. And here, not only ownership as belonging to, but ownership of are in a position to take care of it. Yeah.
What do you mean by the are in a position to take care of it?
Yeah.
Can you say more about this?
Sorry.
Like
I
the last thing that you said, like you said that there should be importance
Mhm.
of value, importance of people who have the ownership of whatever heritage we are talking about. But sorry, I missed the last part. I didn't really get
Oh,
it.
sorry. I think my internet. I think my internet is playing around here by when I was talking about ownership here and it being like collectively belonging to a people and have the ability to take care of it, I'm speaking of from a point of view of not like a systemic point of view, but from a point of view of we are in this community together. All of us understand our care principles, right? But then there are times when maybe things have happened. I don't want to give examples, but maybe climate injustices have happened, or where then people are facing war. Who are the caretakers of this thing in this community of yours who you share the same care principle? So here ownership is to belong to, but to belong to people tied to a principle that they all believe in, one that is not taking away from certain people, and that one that is honoring the rights, one, but also the positions and the places where a lot of this community are at.
Thank you so much. This is really wonderful. I love it. Ownership as belonging to people tied to the principle we all believe in. I think
Yes.
this is a really, really wonderful definition. And another question about digitization, like how do you keep the complexity of the knowledge when you translate it into digital forms?
Wow, I really love this question, Petra, when you sent it. Yeah, it got me down this rabbit hole. But just to mention that I work for this organization. It's called Digital Heritage. I don't know if I'm in a position to share my screen.
Yes, you are. One
Let's
second.
see. Okay. Give me a sec, guys. Oops. So I work for an organization called African Digital Heritage, where our greatest belief is that the work of technology is not just to build futures, but to enable us to radically first reimagine, redefine, and restore African pasts. The reason why I love this question, especially on like the role of digitization in ensuring that now you honor these things, is that one, and I think I saw it from a project we were doing last year, is that the digital allows you to take a pause and to question even your thought process. Why do you do the things you do? Who are you doing it for? And why are they important? And to whom are they important for? So it can be something as simple as classifications or like how you organize your things, how you curate things. But then I think the thing that the digital allows us to do a lot is first to reimagine, as I had read. So what are alternative methods that maybe haven't existed in the system, but would speak to your communities, would speak to the people you want your assets to speak to, but also would include voices that have not been included for a long time. And so, yeah. And so, so here for me, the point that digitization does allow us is first to critically not just reimagine, but to restore systems that one have othered us for so long. But then two, I think that the digital, most importantly, meets us where we are at. And what that basically means is, you know, the thing where they tell you what you don't know until it gets to you. I think when you're deep in like the doing digital work is when sometimes you just, and you're like, wow, how come this thing had never hit me? I'll give a perfect example. So last year we were part of this project. It's called the Talking Objects Archive. So what the Talking Objects Archive was basically bringing together archives and museums to kind of first put their assets on a digital platform and to invite communities to contribute to this platform. At the core of this archive is the fact that a lot of these assets, some of them, I think 5 contributors were coming from museums in Germany, and then we had 5 main contributors, museums in Germany, and then the central contributor was a museum in Senegal. And then now we had independent contributors. Here I'm speaking academics, researchers, curators, who are now asked to speak to this archive. And then it got me thinking, what would an archive say? And why would you arrange things the way you arrange things? What really do you call Black? What really is feminism according to maybe the global North and the global South? And I think when I say that the digital meets you where you are at, is that for a lot or throughout the implementation of this project, some of the practices that were very important at the start were able to be questioned by a lot of team members. And by the time we were finishing the project, people had, and I'm speaking as like people who had worked in this space for a long time, had like really different understandings of maybe systemization, but also just of like worldview. We keep saying that the digital is a form of decolonial work, but then again, the digital doesn't exist in a vacuum. It speaks to the realities that we live within every day. And so I think one of the things that I'm sitting with right now is how are we able to use the digital as a form to decolonize knowledges or as a decolonization tool, but also as a way to kind of spotlight the inequalities or even the still colonial systems that we live in currently. And so top of my mind is one, documenting the process a lot, because again, as I had said, when we started the project, things that were really important at the end of the project, some weren't that important and minds had shifted. And so one of the things that I'm thinking about of late is how are we able not to just showcase this as an end product, but also to showcase how moments can move and how shifts even within teams can move, because shifts within teams can move so that now they can also happens systemically, I believe.
So beautiful. Thank you so much. Really wonderful projects. I'm really wondering how it was to work with 5 German museums and digitization. Like, I mean, 2 very strict systems at once.
Yeah, and that's why I was very particular, like the digital meets you where you are at, because again, let's read the about. Is a digital archive for the colonial knowledge production, where objects are the starting point of polyperspective narratives that illuminate different aspects of history. And yet, while this digital archive was being used as a decolonial knowledge production tool, the very systems or the very contributors are still living a physical life that is one informed by colonial knowledge practices and to a lot of colonial bureaucracies. So yes, I think for my fellow digital archivists and digital heritage specialists, I think it's really important for us to ask the important questions, but also to document our processes a lot, because I think I can only sit here and show you an archive, but I really wish that or thinking through ways in which we can show shifts even as we are working through projects. So I hope that you will do that in your project, Petra. Really looking
Thank
forward to
you. Well, actually, this conversation is part of documenting our process, and actually, this was suggested to me by a curator at the Africa Center in London when I visited there last year, because they asked me like, why don't you let people in to see how it's going? Because that's the most interesting part of it, like how the archive is forming and how is it growing and how is it taking shape. So yes, thank you. And I have another question for you. Like, can you share a moment when this digital archive became more than just a tool for you, when it started to change things with thinking, remembering, or relating to somebody or something?
Yeah, thank you, Petra. That question like really tugged at my heart because yeah, I keep saying that I am in my reflective era as someone who has worked in this space for some years. And so I think I will share one project that we did in 2023 with it was a partnership between 2 professors. It's called the
Mutanu?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
As you can see, I'm in darkness. It's raining. Raining in Nairobi, so I'll try and keep it quick. So yeah, we were reconstructing a theater. And so this is a virtual reconstruction of a theater, the Kamiritu Theater virtual reconstruction. So this group was using theater to speak up against ills from the government. And so what happened in this case is that once the opposition from this side had become like a lot, because they were getting like sold out shows those days, the government then decided that they would, one, use fear and destruction against them, which we see a lot in our history books as a Kenyan. So what happened is, one, this theater that they had built, it was built from bamboo and like local material. It was an open air theater. It looked somewhat like this. This is a virtual reconstruction. It was destroyed. 2 of the professors went into exile, and then some of the team members then got into hiding. And any historical material about this theater was destroyed. And the books that had come out of this play were then banned in the country. And so in 2023, we joined this project because they were documenting the project, and because a lot of the cast members are still alive, they're documenting the project to kind of give it thinking through like social justice causes in the country. So what my team and I did for this project was, again, think through what a virtual reconstruction for this project would look like, because we do not have any physical or relatable copies currently. So this meant going into the books, listening to the stories, and coming up with a virtual reconstruction of the theater. I give this example because you asked when a moment meant relatability. And so we took this virtual reconstruction to the team members. And I remember showing them the photos of the virtual reconstruction, or just showing them the virtual reconstruction. Maybe let me play this video for a minute. So this is how the theater looked like. They had said you enter through bamboo, like it was a bamboo gate. You go in through the theater. Then they told us, oh, it was a slope, and then there were trees. Sometimes people would sit on the trees, maybe add people to it. So this was like really a community informed project. I loved it because they were so into it themselves. Maybe add some people on the stage. And so when we took the final version of this reconstruction to the men and women, right now they're old, some of them couldn't even walk. Suddenly, some of them were jumping into song. And what caught my eye then is I remember one man saying, suddenly I feel like I'm 18 again. I feel like it's 18, it's 2 p.m. and I'm going to rehearse. And just the joy of seeing a memory come to life for me was a lot, because sometimes we just think that the digital just stays in the digital and it doesn't tag to our hearts, or it's just projects that people do that don't tag at our hearts. But I think for me, this project was a perfect example of what imagery and reimagining could do to communities. Yeah, and so for me, yeah, that's the one that I want to share today. We have several moments, but I think that for me is the one I want to share today.
Thank you so much. This is such a wonderful project. I have to ask, did you have any photos or just the stories?
We had stories, but then less than 5 photos to reconstruct from. But what I love about this project is that, as again, I was telling you, the original cast members are the ones who built the theater by their own hands. And so they were able to kind of hear, this is one of the days that we had gone there, and they were showing us how they modeled the theater using a matchbox and matchsticks. So to have the stories, but to also like look at they're in black and white, there are like 3 photos that weren't really visible, and then bring this thing to life was, wow, a powerful way in which you can use digital methods to target the hearts and really tell our stories.
Thank you so much. This is so inspiring, and I cannot help but think about the Zagreb International Student Friendship Club, which was the place where all the international students congregated since the 50s until the 90s, and which during our war in the 90s was first evicted, and then it was burned down. And actually, I have been thinking about this place for many years and thinking like, how do I show it? Because I have one photo from the inside and many stories, and this is so inspiring. So if there is architects there and like people who do this kind of digital art, like let's reconstruct the club, because it's so emotional to even listen to this. Like it's really, really beautiful. Thank you so much, and so inspiring.
I think before I wrap up, or rather before I go to the next question, this is a perfect example of your first question on what ownership would mean. Because sometimes we experience things differently. And as you're saying, someone might have experienced this as a carpenter who was building it. Then there's someone who has experienced this as the playwright, another one as the actor. But then they were all holders and owners of this memory. And I think to be able to do a reconstruction of this in their honor from all their points of view kind of speaks what ownership means in terms of belonging to, because this memory belonged to different people from different angles.
Yes,
I wanted to jump on a comment. I know it's not my place, but I was like,
It's
okay, I
yours,
want to
it's
say.
your place, take it.
But I was just saying that when you were talking, I really loved when you say, like, there's a lot of stuff that I really loved, but the part where, especially in the last example, it's the community informed project, and it reminded me of when we were trying to. We had another project, has nothing to do with the one we're doing now, but we were working on trying to reimagine how a part of a city used to look like. And because there were not a lot of maps of that city, it's because we're talking about the 1800s, that were made. There were one map that was done based on people's description, and it's not accurate when you try to fit it on a GIS. It makes no sense. But what was interesting is that people made things big or small depending on their personal experience and the type of experiences they had in these places. So the place, for example, where some of these people were imprisoned were like big and, looked much more significant. And then other more distant areas where they had no um, memories of or like limited experience with were like much smaller, even though in reality that was not accurate, when we found much more recent information didn't make sense. So what I thought about it is like accuracy might also not be very important. It's like it doesn't really matter if we actually got to make the rebuild the same architecture the same it actually was, because now we're trying to reconstruct it from memory, and we all know that memory works different than reality. It's like it's informed by people's experiences and emotions and reflections, and this is actually a unique way of rebuilding a place from those parts rather than the physical thing. So I like got me thinking about a lot of other things that
Yeah, thanks, Zainab.
Mm.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you both. I really love this, Zainab, the emotional size of memories. And yeah, so, well, we can switch to you then. And I want to ask you about the institutions that are unstable or under threat. Like, what does it mean to safeguard when the situation is not that easy? How do you protect culture when we are talking about displacement and when we are talking about conflict?
So, I also, you started with a very big question. So, the thing with conflict, because we're working in Sudan, so we've just passed over 2 years since the war happened, and with these types of extreme situations, so conflict or like natural disasters or anything like that, you would fully see the fragility of systems, regardless of what systems are we talking about. And you'll get to, conversations about surpassing or, not using certain systems become much more easier. So if a question about what is it like not having museums was a question that all museum specialists ask in a theoretical way, in a conflict context, it's quite literal. There are no museums, or access to museums are limited, and you're forced to kind of think of the alternatives. And the thing is, one of the main approaches is that you try to use all resources you have. So everything you start seeing potential in everything, because also resources are limited. The overall mindset is about that the only things people should think about or support are, related to safety, of course, but also, aid, food, shelter, things like that. So even mentioning the word heritage or culture sounds like disrespect to what people are going through. But the thing is, you have to switch the mindset. So it's heritage is not at risk in the way that we think it is, because heritage could be looked at as a resource. It could looked at as one of the ways people can use it to get through whatever they're experiencing. And of course, I'm here talking about the heritage. When I'm talking about it, I use kind of the bigger term. So everything from livelihoods to local practices, traditions, craft, everything. So there's a lot that goes into that, and understanding that helps seeing how it supports people in such difficult times, and how is it a much more sturdy structure than museums or anything. They heritage has the capacity, both its entire infrastructure has the capacity to withstand conflict impacts. So switching that mindset is important. And the key thing, the only way heritage survives is when people practice it. So if people practicing heritage, then it's safeguarded. So that kind of that type of mindset, and the idea that we're trying to get multiple inputs, multiple supports. So and that it's not like one person, one goal, one output, one shape of output. It's this complex process. And then from a pragmatic point of view, for us as practitioners, you also have to knock all doors. So you try to look at the formal, but also you try to understand how people transmit heritage. You look at online, you look at physical spaces, and you try to mix these tools and spaces as much as possible, because they work together. It's not one versus the other. Yeah, I think, yeah. And then also there is the aspect that you also have to recognize that the conflict period is also a culture production phase. It's not a vacuum. So it's not like heritage stopped before the conflict and will restart after it ends. It will continue being relevant. So people will produce new forms of culture during the conflict, but also will produce new frameworks and new understanding of how they perceive their heritage while this period. And all of that is relevant, and all of that has to be taken into consideration while you're, safeguarding heritage or, working in heritage.
Thank you. That is such an important point, that like the conflict period is a phase of heritage production. And also to draw a parallel, which is not about conflict, but it is about archives. Recently, a colleague asked me, because during our promotion, there was a title in the media which said the heritage of the non-aligned. And my colleague reached out to me and they said, like, what do you mean the heritage of non-aligned? Like, it's not the time to put non-aligned into heritage now. Like, that's not what should happen. Like, that's wrong. Like, don't put it in history in a way. But with what we are talking about, I feel like, yeah, heritage is alive. Like, it doesn't stop. And it's even kind of offensive to say, I mean, if you say like, this is the heritage of these people, and that's when it ends, then you put an end to those people, which is not fair. Because we keep on going. We have a question.
I wanted to reflect on what you said, because that's actually really important as well. The agency, and this is something we also mentioned, me and Mutanu, I think, discussed when we were part of a museums lab, is that people have that sense of agency to say that this is my heritage, because there's another also perception that heritage ended and then our job is to pass whatever we had from our parents down or from our grandparents down, but we kind of forget that we're also part of that. We're also what is relevant to us. The key question here is relevant. What is relevant to us is important, and we could still use the same tool. So, for example, stories that our grandparents tell us are important. But when you look at all of these folk tales, a lot of people would look at it and say, "What is that? We don't understand anything." But if you truly understand the values, you don't really need to stick to the exact same story. You could tell a new story that people understand to pass down the values that create the structure of your heritage, or they create the backbone of your heritage. So you have the agency to contribute to that heritage, and no one actually has the right to say, "Oh, that's not important," because it is your own understanding of your own heritage, and that's a basic human right. Cultural expression is a thing that human rights protect, or forgot the term, but there is a protection, something related to it.
I guess all the wrong things come from like dividing the people from the objects and the terms and the philosophy and so on. So my other question is about communities, like like your practice centers communities. So I'm interested, like, what are the tools and approaches that you use, especially to build trust and respect in that process?
So that's slightly relate. So it also starts from positioning, I would say. So for example, because the traditional form of how we practice, whether we're part of museums or part of archives, has to change, because you'll find the thing is we have a lot of expertise, but we kind of only use it in one place or in a specific job description. But you would find that you could also assist a lot of people in navigating what they're currently experiencing through explaining heritage. And that is important because there are sorry, I forgot what I wanted to say something, but my brain just froze. But yeah, so the idea is that you could use your tools in a much more, not tools, but you can use your own experiences in a different way. For example, when people are suddenly impacted by displacement, they usually what happens, they get moved from their landscapes, but also from their community support systems, and the sudden loss or the sudden inability to practice heritage makes people much more vulnerable suddenly. There are things like, for example, if you come from a different language, you will not be able to practice your language. You will be identified as someone who, has a clear accent. They don't come from the same language as the area, even if you're displaced internally. You're away from your landscape. So if your livelihood has something to do with the landscape, you're suddenly in a new area where you can't really practice your livelihoods. You're away from your support system. That means all of your networks that you relied on, and all of the networks that was part of your previous heritage, or current your heritage, sorry, are no longer there. So you suddenly find yourself in this sense of, floating. You don't know what's going on, and you only have one answer. It's like, okay, the conflict, and then I'm away, or I miss these things. You don't necessarily see these things as real structures. And I really like when Mutanu in the first questions described it as a system, that these types of heritage or belongs to systems, because it is a system. And what you could do as a curator or someone who works in heritage is you actually could support people in seeing that this is happening. You can identify what is going on, what type of heritage and the impact of that loss. And you could also, navigate, argue for the value of using heritage as a lens for even aid. Eating is a part of your heritage. How you eat, what you eat, who you eat it with, when you eat it, all of that is part of heritage. So if you're providing food and you provide it with an understanding of what people's culture and heritage is, it's like when you look at going to hospital, and then at the same time being nursed at home by your mother, and like you have your mother like brushing your head while giving you medicine. You get well both, but like there is a like Mutanu said, care in when giving aid with a heritage mindset. So that's kind of when you position yourself as someone who has the ability to support, to do more, and to use that in every context possible, even in a humanitarian context. And when you also see yourself as part of this community, that's because we are part of this community, we all have lost our homes together. That kind of position, it makes people trust you more, it makes people understand your need, understand your work. And it doesn't matter then that you're trying to build your trust to do something. You're one of the community that's also doing it, like trying to get through this together.
Thank you. Really, really important points. Like, yeah, like everything can be looked at as heritage, and especially those things that we don't like to call aid and stuff like this. And another question, like, can an exhibition or an archive become a space of repair? Well, you started it here with the aid being heritage. Like, what would that require, like practically and also emotionally? What would that require of us?
So for me, when you said repair, in my head was like, could that also mean healing? Or they're the same thing? And that was because I didn't want to give a specific, like a generic answer to that. But for example, during the conflict, in the first year of the conflict, part of our project managed to reopen a museum in a city next to Khartoum. So Khartoum is the capital of Sudan, and then next to it there is Jazeera State. The capital of that is Madani, with Madani. And what happened was the people who were displaced from Khartoum, especially museum experts, came to Madani, and then they reopened a museum there. And because that particular city had the largest number of displaced people at the time, when they reopened the museum, they weren't sure what was going to happen. But what happened was, like, the place was full with people who were who saw opportunities where they could make, they would find a space for their children to have a moment in time where they could do something that's not about the conflict or the war. And unfortunately, that museum only stayed open for 6 weeks, and then the war moved there, and unfortunately, everyone got displaced again. But during those 6 weeks, it was you can truly see how people were using it as a space of healing. How artists who lost their livelihoods came and used that museum as an art space. Children were dancing in the yard. There were some practitioners who actually who used I can't remember the term, but like they use like type of healing with art. Like it's a specific professional practice. So they came and they did these sessions there. So children, while they're expressing with art, they were dealing with the impact of, like, the mental impact of war and so on. And that was a very beautiful example. But thinking of how can that happen online, I see that from one point where usually if you're online in especially in our case, the majority of the stuff you see is quite intense. There are news about what's going on, but also there's these very harsh arguments between fighting people, because that's the type of dialogue that happens during conflict. Everything is black and white. There is no option for gray. So either you're with me or against me, you're right, you're wrong, stuff like that. And it's quite intense because it does not allow for healing. It doesn't allow for people to pass their certain narrative. So if you're if you're online in a conflict, space, if you're like part of a community online, and you're only subjected to this, it's not the best place to be. But the thing with heritage is that because it's not politics, and it's understandably not politics, so it's not something people will and of course people could weaponize it, but most of the time, people will leave it alone. And that allows that through these spaces, through this angle, through this framework, you're allowed to navigate what's going on with your life, or where you're with trying to figure out the future, or trying to understand what's going on, or seeing an alternative viewpoint. You can do that from heritage, and that I feel is really powerful in a way.
Thank you so much. I will go to our next speaker now, Seth. I don't see Seth, but he was just here, and I trust that he's still here. Ah, there he is, and he can unmute himself. Amazing. Hi,
Yeah.
Seth.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. And yeah, my first question for you is about the Library of Africa and African Diaspora, and especially its residency programs. It's a very beautiful space with a residency program for writers. And I want to ask you, what did you witness emerge from this program?
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, my name is Seth. I'm the manager of the Library of Africa and African Diaspora here in Accra, Ghana. So I'll use the opportunity to talk about the library a little bit, just a short introduction to the
Please.
library's work. And I think most of us are working within much more digital spaces, and we work in the physical space. And I think it is Zainab who said that what we are doing is sort of also complementing what the digital archives are also doing. So we are also an archive of materials written by African and African diasporan writers, so writers of African descent, and this collection is something that has been built over the past eight years. The founder of the library sort of collected the materials that will form the basis of the collection of the library, even though it has expanded beyond the original collection. And of course, when the library started, it was let me say, a lending library here in Accra. And then we realized that how can we best, or what's the best way of actually getting people to use the materials in the library? Of course, I mean, lending books to people in the city is always has its own problems. And so the solution was to start a writing residency, which Petra just talked about. So we have this writing residency that we invite writers from Africa and her diasporas to basically come into the library, into the physical space of the library, and to use these materials in producing their own work. And so that is basically what we've been doing over the past 4 years. And we have two types of programs we do. I think, or let me just talk about our main program now, which we call the Black Atlantic Residency. So for our Black Atlantic Residency, we are inviting writers from Africa and then her diaspora basically to come together and sort of work together in answering some of the more pertinent questions that are sort of affecting people in the world. And Yeah, and so basically we've had writers from Brazil, specifically from places like Salvador. We have writers from Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and then we have writers from the UK, basically Black writers who live in Europe, and then America, and then I mean all over the continent of Africa. So yeah, I mean, if I'm answering the question, is indeed this has been a very let me say inspirational experience for myself. Who I'm meeting all these people. We are meeting all these people from all over the world who sort of have very unique experiences, but at the same time, there's a common thread that is sort of connecting all of us. And I must say, interestingly enough, this year's edition of the residency, we actually had a team called African Solidarities, which was sort of looking at how we have sort of worked together as one people for over the past few decades and now, and how it matters for our place in the world today. And so this has been a very inspiring and let me say uplifting experience for myself, and then for the users of the library. I mean the writers who come here, because it's always very engaging experience that sort of sort of make them better persons than they were when they sort of came here. So I mean I'm we are so proud of the work that we do and contributing and the contributions to knowledge production by African and African diaspora writers.
Thank you so much, Seth. Such a wonderful, wonderful space in Accra. And also the writers sleep there as well, right? And they cook as well. I remember when you were
Yes.
showing me the library, and I think I smelled like lunch. It's quite an intimate experience, I guess, for everybody. And also I imagine that for writers it must be very interesting to meet the people who are visiting the library during their process.
Yeah. Oh, always. It's quite interesting. So usually when we have the writers in residence with us, we sort of restrict the people who come to the library. But then it so happens that you still get people coming to the library, and it's always an experience for they meet all sorts of people from all over the world, and it's really and sometimes it even becomes the highlight of their experience because they meet this interesting, and usually I do get like writers and academics from other parts of the world. And so it's also part of the experience of having a physical space where people can actually meet and engage and have conversations on issues that affect all of us collectively.
Thank you. A really, really amazing space. And my next question is, what does it mean to curate a library? Like not only books, but also as a space of ideas for care and for collective memory. I know the portraits are there as a kind of a guidance, but maybe you can tell us more how is the library curated?
Yeah, so fundamentally, this is a library, not like any other library that you would see, because this is also we uniquely kind of collected and curated the materials in a way that will showcase the length and breadth of the literary production that has sort of gone on within Africa and her diaspora. So I mean, there's one thing I must say is anybody who comes to the library, the first thing they say is wow. Most people come to the library, like the first thing they say is wow, because I mean, and that is what we sort of set out to do. Of course, we fundamentally we want our people to see that we've actually published a lot of materials as people. We have actually sort of engaged on so many levels through the literature that we've sort of produced, and so that is how basically the library has been set up. And also, I mean, by the time you sort of go through the library, you sort of inspired by what's we think is the legacy of our people, what we produce. And I mean, our people need to know that we've actually produced a lot of literature, and we are a people of heritage. And so that is fundamentally how we sort of created a space. And the intention is to also keep that memory of our people and what they've done in the past, how the struggles of our people have sort of inspired the literature that has been produced over the decades. And how we can sort of continue that work and building on that solidarity with our fellows who are all over the world. And so yeah, it's very like I said again, I'm using the word inspiring a lot. Like it's very inspiring for myself because when I started this work, I mean, I was just managing a library, but it became more than just managing a library. And how the purpose that we have now is to, of course, to showcase to our people that we actually have a very rich literature, and that literature needs to be built on. We need to build on what we have, and not always be starting from scratch. And so fundamentally, when people are here, especially most of the visitors to the library are mostly people of African descent too, and so it's sort of showing them that okay, we have all these materials, and these are materials that we can see ourselves in them. I mean, typically, even in libraries in the country here in Ghana, you wouldn't. I think you will find less black books there than books from other part of the world, and so this is the problem that we are faced with, and so we are trying to showcase that okay, we can have more black books and other. Of course, we are not saying people should not read from other part of the world, but we are saying that well, our focus is going to be on showcasing the books by black writers, and then the other materials also be added to it. And so I mean it changes. We are trying to flip the narrative around what a library looks like and what a library's collection also looks like. So yeah, fundamentally, yeah.
You. And for you, like working in such a Pan-African and diasporic institution and such an important one, what for you are the most urgent questions today when it comes to all of these topics that we have talked about? Like what comes up as most urgent for you?
Yeah, I mean, so fundamentally, since we are a place that is sort of preserving knowledge, the knowledge of our people. I mean, at the heart of what we do is a question of how do we sort of ensure that African and African diaspora literature is accessible and studied and also celebrated by our people and also by the people of the world. I mean, fundamentally, that's what's at the heart of the work we do. And I mean, in a way, when we bring in the writers to work here, we expect that they are producing new materials that are sort of based on what has been produced already, but they're just building on that. And so, I mean, we are making these materials accessible to them, and hopefully, through what they produce, we will sort of end up changing the world with it, or changing the world for our people, basically. And I think it might this question also just brings to mind a conversation with a South African poet and academic who sort of came to the library and then saw this material by a writer from Guyana, and she was like, I've traveled around the world, but and this book is so difficult to find. But how did you get this particular material here? And this is the problem that we face, because a lot of Black literature, let me say, or African literature is so difficult to find anywhere, or mostly in Africa. It's so difficult to find our own literature in Africa. And it's also very interesting that when you are in Europe, I mean, it's quite easy for you to buy a book by an African writer than when you're on the continent of Africa, because the books are very expensive. And so, I mean, the ordinary person is not going to be buying those materials. And even if you have the money to buy it, you wouldn't get it. You wouldn't get these materials here. And so, those materials are often found in the global north, but then so difficult to find on our side of the world. So, I mean, that accessibility to these materials is very important, and I think that's probably the most fundamental question for the work that we do. Also, I think one important question is also how do we sort of challenge colonial legacies in knowledge production? I mean, it's very important because I mean, like I said, you would want to change the mindset of our people around our own heritage and culture, to let people believe, I mean, in the rich cultural heritage that we sort of have, and you would have the interference of the colonial legacies, which is still sort of affecting our people and affecting the way things are done in our part of the world today. And so one of the library's work is to also, we started, for instance, we started an imprint at the library. The idea is to produce literature that wouldn't be ordinarily published by publishers, the established publishers who are mostly in the West. That's also another dimension of the conversation, which is that who are producing the literature that we are producing from our parts of the world, because those producing the literature are the ones who sort of have control over the kind of knowledge that we are producing. They can tell you that they don't want this idea, or the editor can tell you, no, I don't like this, because the Western audience are not going to be reading. So, I mean, how do we change that? How do we change that? I mean, it starts from, I think it starts from a knowledge production itself, and how knowledge production, we do not have control over our own knowledge production. And so fundamentally, I mean, if we can control the knowledge that we produce, then I think we would eventually sort of change or challenge the colonial legacies that still have a lingering effect on our life. I mean, in Africa and around the world, basically. Yeah. So I think those are the two main questions that I think are very, very important for us at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you, Seth. Indeed, they are extremely important. The control over knowledge production, and yes. I would like to use this opportunity to invite the participants to join us. We still have time. I have more questions for you, but I think it's more interesting if we expand the conversation. So if we have questions or comments, you can write them in the chat, or you can turn on your camera, and I will permit you to unmute. It's about control. Yes, so if we have somebody, or you can also raise your hand and all the other regular Zoom stuff.
I wanted to reflect
Hello.
on.
Yes, there is a person here. Yes, you can. Yes. Hi. We don't hear you yet. You are not muted, but I do not hear you. Maybe it's the headphones.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hi.
Okay, cool. Hi, how's everyone doing?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Matt. I'm calling from Los Angeles. I saw the Zoom link in the group chat from Documenta, so I thought I might join. So
Amazing.
I'm so surprised by all the information. This is such a nice way to start my morning. Thank you so much for sharing everything.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm Nigerian American. I grew up in the States, and for me, when it comes to thinking about heritage and history, it's it's a difficult thing for me to talk about because a lot of the information is just like not there for me to access. Being here in the States, and I have to like try and get what I can from relatives, or try and get information from things on the internet. And I don't know, heritage and history has always been kind of difficult for me to deal with, because it's almost like it's almost like I can't access it myself, because it's blocked off by my own, I guess, family and things like that, because there's difficult things to talk about. So I guess my question is, I guess, coming from a space of not access, like, I don't know, what advice do you have for people like me in the diaspora to access a heritage or access history that is a little bit harder to access, especially not being within my country of Nigeria?
Welcome to answer, whoever wants to go.
Well, I could start, but I really hope the others also contribute. Because this is something I also a bit got involved in. I used to live in Sudan, and then when the war happened, I came to live. I'm in the UK now, and because all of the Sudanese British people I'm meeting they're in the diaspora, and they've been asking me the same question. And the thing is, I feel that the people who lived outside of their own countries, I don't know if this, it's not necessarily, might not, you know, be reflective on you, but like this is what I've had with these conversations, is that some of them feel that whatever their understanding of the heritage is not the true one because they haven't got it from their own countries. That's not true. The other thing is there is an issue with the type of new heritage that grows from you living in a diaspora, from because the you know, your parents or your family would pass down a lot of that heritage, but it's not always the visible thing. It's not this is the dish or this is this thing. It's sometimes it would be their you know, how language works, how people would you know, get superstition about something or whatever. These are things that are they give back to their children. And all of these are really important, and they're really key for you to understand, you know, whatever you want from the heritage. What I feel that what is important about safeguarding heritage, because we also get asked this question a lot of why are we saving things that a lot of people would find old and irrelevant. The thing is, we're not doing that. We're trying to help people not get vulnerable with the feeling that they lost the heritage. You know, that process of losing heritage makes people vulnerable. We're trying to prevent that, but not necessarily trying to safeguard a specific form of heritage, because heritage has evolved throughout, you know, it continued to evolve. Yes, maybe the process of the evolution was disrupted due to colonization or changing of lifestyle, but we still don't know how it will continue to evolve within these times because we're still new to it. So what I would say is, first, I would always say that whatever you know of heritage is a true thing. It's that this is the real thing. It's not something you haven't attained. It's whatever you have now. But if you want to learn more, then it's always an individual process, because even for people who live within the country that, you know, the heritage is in, don't all understand it the same way. We don't all get it from one source. You would be within a specific community, and that community could be anywhere, and you would pick up certain values or you know, rituals or whatever from different parts of your experience being in that space. And you could learn from an elderly person, but you could also learn from your like 5-year-old cousin. You know, everyone will teach you and will transmit heritage to you. So you could also just become a student and try to be more we try to ask more, try to find other people and find communities wherever you are. And then also be you know, the mindset is that whatever you pick out of this is the real thing, because that's what's important. That's kind of what my view on that. I don't know, Mutanu and Seth, if they want to.
Yeah, I think you put it really well, Zainab. But I think from a point of view, something that I'd like to put out there is, again, the importance of community, and here community being the people who lean on the same understanding, and also the fact that these things come to you wherever you are and when you're ready. So look at the people who are doing the work that speaks to you, and starts there. I know it's very abstract to speak to tell it like that, but yeah, just start from like a point of wanting to learn who the actors are at, but also look at it from a point of view of everyone is really growing and growing their craft. I don't want to say sharpening their craft. And tending to their craft. So yeah, I think there are a lot of alternative actors in the space. I understand the hesitancy of like knowing who to look at too, especially in terms of how things are framed and what is framed and what is out there more. So yeah, I think there are a lot of alternative people who would speak to some of the questions that you have. So yeah, you could start there and then kind of snowball it into this growing practice and growing of whatever knowledge that it is that you want to look at. Yeah, that would be my advice.
Thank you. Seth, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think fundamental. I think what Zainab and talk about community. I think is probably the most important factor. I think community, because it's the heritage is also with the community, and so you. If I'm going to talk about it in terms of literature and what is being produced, being in a community is probably an easier way of, you get people who will be recommending stuff for you to sort of check out and all that. So I think it's very important to be part of a community and not be an island of yourself. Then you have a lot of questions and you have answers to, like, people have gone through the same experiences and they are within the community. So I think community could find a resilient way of, like, sort of connecting to the heritage in such a very unique way. So I think for me, it's community. Yeah, to be part of a community. Yeah.
Almost always the answer. Yes, thank you, Seth. Do we have other questions, comments? Please don't be shy. We don't have.
Thank you.
Yes, please go.
I just want to say thank you for the responses. I never thought of like, I never thought like of what I do as like heritage. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna sit with that. Like, I appreciate those words, and definitely, yeah, I'll be leaning into community a little bit more. Thank you so much. This is really great.
Thank you. Yeah,
I was
anyone
going to
else?
recommend Sabina, who wrote her question, if
Yes.
she would want to say it, because I feel
Yes.
it's more of a discussion-y question.
Let me ask Sabina to unmute if she's here with us.
Hi.
Hi, Sabina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your answers. Actually, throughout the discussion, I got a lot of insight into what I was asking myself, because coming from a perspective of curating, I always ask myself how to deal with the questions of heritage and identity, because at the end of the day, it always feels like on one hand, you don't want to abandon, but also you don't want to fetishize. So my question is more about how to navigate these very, I would say, tricky terrains when talking about identity and heritage.
So the question is how.
So the question, there was no real question. I was, as you can see in the chat, I was actually more questioning the agency of power and context that comes when talking about heritage, and the question is more about who gets to recontextualize and under what conditions is it okay to talk heritage.
Yeah. I don't know if the others have comments, because I feel I talked a lot, but I could also throw a thought there as well.
You can do it. I also have a comment.
Yeah, I feel that yeah, there is a lot of limitation. We're all kind of reaching this conclusion that the current structures and institutes that we have a lot of limitations when it comes to preserving heritage, because it has a very static way of preserving it. While heritage is not static, it's very organic. And we yet have not formed a form of, like, let's say, formal institute that kind of that puts in that aspect of dynamic aspect into the preservance of heritage. So the thing is, I feel that it's important to understand that, you know, and in our case, for example, there was the only way for us to safeguard heritage is to empower people to take that agency themselves, because we were limited. We don't have any building or institutes or archives And even if we did, they would be limited to the space they're in or the community they were serving. So it was like I won't say that archives and museums don't have a role to play, because they do, and they're like even in Sudan they've been there for like 100 years, so like they become part of heritage themselves. But in our context, at least the people have to take that agency, otherwise it will definitely be lost. All of these values we're trying to pass down were lost. And one way of doing it, and this is slightly related to the last point Seth mentioned on knowledge production, but I would want to make it more about the indigenous knowledge production, and how that works is because these processes were disrupted with the Western understanding of knowledge and knowledge practice. We kind of lost the ability to know how knowledge is passed down or developed in indigenous or traditional forms, and with that as well, how heritage is usually passed down. It's like we still do it, but we're not doing it consciously. And with the conflict, not having conscious action impacts the ability to do it. It's when you're suddenly living alone in a completely new society with no one around you, you will have to play the role of multiple people in your previous society to be able to preserve or safeguard heritage. So unless you're conscious about it, you can't do that. You will just, abandon the whole thing. So in our case, that was what we had to do, but maybe the others have to talk about more of other contexts.
Yeah. Thanks, Zainab. I really love the question that you raised, Sabrina. It's a powerful question, and I think it speaks to the why we do this work. I love that you phrased on like who gets to remix and recontextualize and under what conditions. Looking at it from like an alternative point of view, people who have been othered for such a long time, and people who like work at the precipice of neither being here or there, displaced communities, people who are finding identities in new places, and yet they have been told that maybe this is who you are and this is who you're about. Okay, or rather, the book says this is who you are and this is who you're about, yet the holders of knowledge know this is not the truth. Then I believe they get to do the recontextualization, they get to do the reinterpretation, and they get to ask the critical questions as to why systems do exist that do not favor them, and what are the alternatives of building systems and building actually knowledge systems and traditional systems that honor their practices, that honor their cultures. So looking at it from a point of view of like an alternative archive, an alternative historian, but also people who've been othered for so long, I say that it is the people who have always been at the disadvantage of power, and the people who have always been, I want to reuse your words, who have always not benefited from the process not being neutral. So yes. And yes, I know it's hard, especially because the people who benefit from the process not being neutral benefit from these knowledges, benefit from these stories, only empowering a certain few. And yeah, I think it's important for us to imagine sustainable, but also really soft and sweet pathways for doing this work.
Maybe Seth, do you have something to add?
No, I don't, sorry, but I don't have anything to add. But I might have to go very soon because I have a
Okay.
resident coming to the library and I have to get ready for
Work
them.
is calling.
Sorry.
Thank you so much, Seth, for being
I'm
with
very,
me.
very sorry.
Thank you. No. Thank you so much for your contribution.
And thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, I hope all of us keep on doing our work and contributing to preserving of our knowledge and heritage. Thank you very much.
It's nice
Thank
to
you
meet
so much. Thank you,
All right.
Seth. I will just add my comment, and then I see a question from Yelena. When it comes to like not fetishizing the communities, this is something that really bothered me when I started to work with these histories, because I found the publication of the International Student Club, and there I found so many documents, and I thought, oh my God, there are so many communities that would love to see this, but it's in my language. Like the first thing when I opened it, there was the Somali Student Association of Zagreb, and I was like, well, there are people from Somalia who would love this. And then there was another community and another one and another one. And like, nobody knows about this. Not those communities, not my community, nobody. But who am I to do this? Because I don't come from African, Asian, or American communities. I come from Zagreb, Croatia. But it took me quite a while, and it took me a lot of conversations with different friends, especially from those communities, because at first I was like, okay, it's easy. I'll just find the researchers from these communities, and I'll be like, do you want your stuff? I'm going to transcribe it for you. I'm going to translate it for you. And then nobody really cared that much. and I was like, oh, wow. And on the other hand, I had all these people doing their PhDs at Oxford and Cambridge, and they're always white, and they're always messaging me, and they were like, hey, Petra, I know that you do this about the students of Zagreb, and could you give me something? And like, this is my unpaid work as well. So that's exactly not the people that I wanted to give this stuff to. And it has been quite complicated, but first of all, I've had some friends who encouraged me. I was like, but I will make mistakes and I will offend people. And my friend said, so go ahead and do it and take the responsibility for it. So that's what I did. But also with the archive, what we do is, unfortunately, Rea cannot be with us today, but we have commissioned people from the communities that we are researching. And they get to, first of all, they are paid, and then they get to decide what is the direction of their research. They get to curate the materials, and this is kind of how we do the ethical thing in curating. Although I think it's very, very important for us also to keep on questioning, like, who has the agency, who has the power, and where is it going? And yes, but at some point, unfortunately, the situation that we have in Croatia, where we used to have 1,000 African students every year, and today we have around 300 Africans in the entire country, which is something I learned about recently, is that this heritage is dying like every day. So if somebody doesn't collect it, it's gone. So it's also a matter of urgency here. And responsibility, but we try to be very, very careful and keep on questioning ourselves. Yes, and now we had a question from Yelena. Yelena, do you want to say your question, or should we read it? There's an iPhone joining us, but that may not be Yelena. Let me just try to...
Not sure whether it works. Maybe it works now.
Ah, yes, it does.
Yes,
Hi, Yelena.
hi. No, it was just a comment because, like, you know, we are here sitting in the office of Invoche. Greetings to everyone. Thank you so much for your, well, it was a lecture in a way. I really see it as a lecture. And like somehow this was more as a comment, meant as a comment than as a question in a way, because like I somehow feel something that you started talking about, Petra, that this moment of kind of I mean, I somehow didn't hear that much today about non-alignment, but I think it's a global South coming together, or like global majority coming together, which is already a step forward in a way. Like somehow all of the people who are extracting knowledge, I mean, mostly they come from Yugoslavia. And then I always ask myself, you know, how do we talk about non-aligned legacy from other perspective than Yugoslavia? Because, you know, I definitely don't know enough to be able to point at materials or use the materials or work with materials or share the materials that comes from another perspective. So it's not that much about like the books are not there. I don't even know what the books are, you know, like I would love to know, but how do we come together in the way that it's like equal exchange? Not like, yeah, it was a friendship. I'm not sure it was a friendship, you know, every friendship has some kind of interests, especially when you control the, you know, like like funds for economic development, like Yugoslavia did in the United Nations. So, you know, there are some things that I think need to be resolved before we start discussing this idea about non-alignment today as a real political potential in a way. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure whether there is a question, but like comment or thoughts are very welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yelena. Hey, hi. Hello. It's the whole office. Awesome. Do you want to, does somebody want to start? I can also talk about this. Yeah, like for me, always the answer when I don't know what to do with something, always the answer is to try to find the person who knows the answer. And kind of with heritage, like now for I think 5 years ago we did this project where we were working with archive as a design lab. And basically our idea was to create a table that opens up, and it's like a white public table, and we put the heritage stuff in the middle so that everybody can look at it and everybody can discuss it. And this has been for me the only way to approach these kind of things. Like this is kind of how the non-aligned archive, the concept of is like, let's put this in the middle of the table so we can actually have a conversation about what it is, and we can see who comes up and who has things to say, because I do not have the answers. Maybe Elena does not have the answers. Maybe none of us here have the answers, but we can engage in a conversation and we can find some things. This is like, it's not perfect, but so far it's working. But yeah, we are dealing with huge gaps. This is also something like we have been talking about heritage, but there is like, if we look at like these official definitions of heritage, there is so much heritage that is missing. We are talking about so much heritage that is missing, like things that have been taken, things that have been looted, things that have been burned down, things that have been taken away through violence or haven't gotten their, like, what they deserve. Not only things, but practices and all of these, I don't have the right term, things. So we are talking about gaps. Yeah, and I think what is a useful thing that a gap can do is to gather people so that we can look at the gap and try to find what is it that we are missing. But yeah, join me here. I'm getting lost too.
I was actually just looking at the question in the chat, which was about the issue of using legacies for, you know, monetizing and tokenization. And I honestly feel conflicted ideas about it. In one hand, I see it as a really bad thing, but on another, I don't, because with systems, sometimes you have the authority to reverse the system to make it work for you. Of course, if we're talking about like a full like what's the term in English? I forgot. But the, you know, how money is managed in a state, I can't remember the term. It's always designed that certain people would benefit for with everything. So for example, the same people will get all of the monetary value, and the same people will get will benefit from the tokenization of the heritage, and it's always not the source or the producers of the heritage. But at the same time, we also have the issue or discussions where, for example, in specifically, again, because I work with heritage, that's all I have to do to talk about we always have this discussion about how the only way to save heritage outside, let's say, tourism, for example, or outside all of these ways, or heritage is usually promoted as of. So there is an issue where even when you look at discussions that are done by like officials, so you know where all of the rules are written and legislations and things like that are made, when you want to make an argument for heritage, it's always have to equal money. So for example, the state will support heritage if heritage is proven to bring money, even if you say the value is people's well-being. The well-being has to answer to money at some point. So it's like well-being, and people then will feel happy, and then while they feel happy, they will work more, and then they'll make the state more money. Because we kind of collectively lost the ability to give value to things that does not bring our government or our country's money. And the thing is, heritage can do that because, you know, there are certain aspects of heritage that are like, they are part of livelihoods or sustaining economies, but that's not why heritage exists, or why people practice it, or why it survived all of these times, you know. And if we try to reduce it to only monetary value, we kind of, it's also kills a lot of, not kills, but impacts a lot of heritage. That being said, I've seen people who try to use these exact systems to get the youth to pay interest to heritage. So I've seen this school here in it's a Sudanese school, and they were trying to get the children to come and learn the language and, you know, learn about their heritage. No one was interested because they're living in a Western society. So they told them, if you come and learn Arabic, because we speak Arabic, you'll be able to go at one point to Dubai and get a really big job and make a lot of money. And that got a lot of young people to come to learn in the Sudanese school. Of course, they were learning about heritage, but they were there to learn about Arabic. And now, as someone, I would never try to promote heritage from that point of view, but we also have to recognize that people, the children and the people everyone lives in today's society, and they have to make a living, they have to grow, they have to, you know, join this international like this, what is it called, like those online people, what are they called, influencer, like lifestyle that is everywhere. Everyone is sharing the same thing, everyone wants to be part of it, but you have to also use it to make. So it's, I'm not sure if I answered any of the points or target, like, but this is what I was trying to think from what I've seen in that question or comment actually.
Interesting, Zainab. Interesting. I hear you. I hear you. But then I think I would look at it from a point of view on who is benefiting from this corruption, the tokenization and monetization, and what does it do to our histories? Does it continue portraying the same inequalities, or does it then honor and celebrate the people of the legacy or of the knowledge? Right? And so I think in order to get there, we can't act alone as heritage workers or cultural workers. I think we need to work with our policymakers to see how traditional knowledge expression and traditional cultural knowledges are honored in our constitutions or even worldwide, and what that means. So wow, it looks like an overhaul of the system, which I think is what the work is about. But then again, I think sitting in the uncomfortable and being able to dream of what possible, sweet, imaginable futures look like for us. And even if not for us, for the future generation, because I think, we need to we need to put in the work. I see it every day on how much work we need to put in. Sometimes it gets daunting, but I believe that, yeah, if we band together, it can be done. Only if you ask the critical questions.
Thank you. Winwoke, do you have other questions, comments? Because you're a bunch of people there.
Yeah, while we were sitting cozy here and discussing heavy stuff, so please meet my colleagues.
Hi, nice to see you. Yes, I'm Natasha.
Hi, Mara. I was just, maybe it's not so much a question, but also like echoing on what was said. I think Zainab said that in regards to, I'm not sure though where it came from, but in regards to which heritage and what is remembered. I can't remember who said that, but I think this is there's also, I'm just also thinking of ways in which we have internalized mechanisms of silencing ourselves, of unmattering certain memories. And I think Seth said that about knowledge production. I think this is a very deep process as well. Like our inner decolonization as well, our inner silencing as well, because there are structures that teach us what matters to be remembered. And those structures, there's like a word here in German, it's like you kind of you fulfill an order before the order has been spoken out, kind of, you know? So I think it can also happen that it can impact the way you tell stories as well. If you live in a world that taught you that certain stories don't matter to be told and shared. So it's not really a question, but I'm just taking a lot from what everyone has said, how deep this process of decolonial knowledge production is, and how we can really create sustainable architectures for this knowledge production, of this mattering of those stories, on those knowledges. Yeah, so it's really, I really thank each one of you. I take so much, you know, from like, yeah, we were just sitting here and saying that we just did not know about the programs also in Accra, the residency, and so we also here in a bubble, and we're very grateful that we were able to join today and hear you all speak. I'm not the fastest, so I probably have some questions, but they might come by midnight or something like that, not in the time frame that we're in. Yeah, but this is what I can think of at this point. I'm just very nourished, so thank you for feeding me a lot. So thanks a lot.
Same for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes, we have some very beautiful comments here as well. Maybe we can use the last minutes maybe for another question before Mutanu's laptop dies. Or any comments. We still have quite a few people here with us. Yes. Branka Tsietichanen as well. Thank you so much. Yes, it's really important to reconnect. And wonderful. It's a wonderful process, I believe. Yes, please, you can ask a question. Zidor, let me.
Yes, hello. One, I
Hi.
wanted to say I'm extremely apologetic for coming in towards the end, but even just the two responses that I got a privilege to hear was very sweet. And I do work in Boston around community archiving, but have been in conversation with archivists in Ghana, which is where my family is from, and see the urge that I think people across mediums are interested in doing this work of recollecting, of remembrance, as my meditation calls for from Howard Thurman. But nonetheless, what I wanted to ask and sort of put out there is if there is spaces that are constantly having these conversations around what this looks like on the lands that we're currently living on. And if those resources can be shared to us who are interested in having these conversations across the diaspora. And if there aren't these conversations happening, what does it look like for more conversations to take place around this so that we can sort of share knowledge and exchange resources if needed?
Thank you so much. I ask myself the same question.
The conversations around the
Around these topics, this is what I got.
Around these topics, around decolonial thinking, around archiving, around these preservation practices that are taking places in different communities.
Let me do a shameless plug on what I do. Yes, we at African Digital Heritage, every bi-monthly, we host something called the Culture Catch-Up, where we sit down with actors in the space to kind of think about through their processes and also like what they're trying to change. We also have a podcast out, 2 podcasts actually. One was on like the myth of development, and another one was on like what open restitution looks like. So that one is in partnership on a project called Open Restitution Africa. But then yes, go through our website. It's a lot, but a lot of how we are also grappling with and trying to somewhat change the system and the things that we have seen.
Zainab, you were gonna say?
No, I was going to give a generic answer saying that for me, because I do see these discussions, but it wasn't in one place, and it's always like in projects and in like every time I meet with other people, me, Mutanu, and Petra, for example, we're all 3 part of a museums lab program. That's how we know each other. And that was also a place where we had a lot of similar discussions and we got to see works done in different countries. So it's usually where people with a similar interest meet. These types of discussions arise a lot, especially the question of decolonization, because it's everything. Decolonization is literally about everything. And, there is, no matter what the project, the research we're doing, there would be a layer related to decolonization. And it's so deep and so diverse. And there are so many viewpoints people are taking into consideration. So I don't have a specific project. I would recommend our project, but it's not like it's very specifically about Sudan. I'll put the link as well. It's just for people to also see what we're doing.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so this is an online museum attempt, which is a project that looks at articles and media outputs as museum objects. So it's curated like a museum, but it's a blog-like website. That's my input.
Thank you so much. Yes, I mean, we have only started as the non-aligned archive. We haven't even bought the domain in English yet. And I realized today, I was like, if somebody asks for the link, how will I explain to you archivnestverständig.org? So we should get the English one as well. But I want to say that as a digital archive, we are very open to kind of collectively directing the direction of the project. And I really, really, really enjoyed this conversation with you. And I think maybe this might be the way to go. Unless everybody is just being nice and waiting for us to finish.
I wanted to say thank you for the people who made all of their comments on the chat, and also for the group joining from Milena's account because all of them were really insightful and and great. So I like all of the opinions shared.
Yes. Mutanu, do you want to say something before you leave us?
Yeah, thank you so guys for showing up. We see you, and yeah, I can't wait to see more about your projects. I really hope, Petra, you would start the mailing list from these people
Okay.
that you put together. There's someone who added in the wrote on the comments and said maybe you should start a mailing list. So yes, maybe you should
Yes.
start a mailing list, and it'll be a way of seeing what each and everyone is up to. But thank you so much, everyone, for giving us the time and for sitting through my dark screen. And I hope it was worthy for you as it was for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, like we have a mailing list on our website, which I haven't figured out yet. I just get notices that people have signed up, but I will figure out how it works. And yes, as I said, this project is only starting to shape up. I think these international conversations are very, very important, because yet we cannot meet in one place, but we should be. I think this is the goal. And yes, thank you so much for everybody who took the time to be with us, to listen to us, to think, to ask questions, to listen. Thank you so much for joining us, all of you. It was a pleasure for me. I'm very, very happy. And yes, you can reach out to us through our website. I will ask Stella to put the link in once again in the chat. And yes, I wish you all a beautiful evening. And yes, thank you. Just thank you. Yes.
Thank you for having us.
Bye. Oh, hey,
Bye,
Jordan.
Jordan.
Super nice. Yes. Oh, thank you.